All right, we are right at 7 o'clock, and I see that we've got several people on board already. So I'm excited to chat with you tonight and talk with you a little bit about high school curriculum and answer any questions you may have. I'm glad to help with that as well. My name is Margaret Bolton. I am the CEO of College Solutions, and we do work with families nationwide. We even have some families abroad who work with us. So I'm glad to talk a little bit about curriculum and go through a little bit about how a college will look at a student's curriculum and how that can help you guide your child or your student as they go through the college process. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll jump in. All right. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this. So tonight we're just going to talk about a couple of things, really, several things. We're going to talk about the 5 core classes and what those are, how important context is to a curriculum, how a transcript is evaluated, APs versus IBs. Again, the context of a school we'll go back to and talk again, and then rank and quintile. Just a little bit about us, in case you're wondering who's talking to you or where we came from. These are our counselors who are on my team. As you can see, we have counselors that are based all over the nation. So Boston-based, California-based, Chicago-based, and then a couple here in Virginia. I too am based in Virginia. As you can see, I am the CEO and managing counselor of the firm. And then we do have some all-star operations managers and administrative folks and application editors that really support our team and our students. We've been in operations for just over 20 years now, and I've loved being a part of this team. I have been here for just about 10 years and have loved being a part of this group and loved getting to know our students, and curriculum planning is probably one of my favorite things. So when this came up as a webinar topic, I knew I wanted to share with you tonight what I knew. Where is all this coming from? A lot of families will say, how do you know what you know? That's a great question. I worked in admissions at the University of Virginia for 5 years. And many of my colleagues also worked in admissions. My colleague Patrick worked in admissions at Northwestern. My colleague Stephanie worked in admissions at the University of Virginia as well. My colleague Leanne worked in admissions at several private colleges on the West Coast. So all of us kind of bring our expertise to curriculum planning, and that's what I'll share with you tonight. 5 core classes. Many students come to me and ask me about, do I have to take one more year of foreign language? Do I have to take a math this year? I encourage students to take all 5 core classes, all 4 years of high school. A core class is English and foreign language, math, science, and history. Hence the questions come. Can I drop foreign language in senior year? Can I double in science and not take a history? Can I? The question is valid. The answer is it depends. The answer on foreign language is a little more clear in that I remind students that most colleges have a foreign language requirement. And by that, I mean colleges expect most of their incoming students to either take a placement test and place into their foreign language requirement, which is usually about 2 years, or they expect students to start a new language, which could be up to 4 semesters. So if you quit foreign language after junior year, and then you go to take that placement test 2 years later at whatever college you're delighted to be in, you may be a little rusty. And therefore, we may have to take more foreign language in college, which, as I tell my students, foreign language classes are usually 5 days a week and sometimes early in the morning. So I always tell my students, it's pay me now or pay me later. Do foreign language in high school when you're already there, your friends are there, or have to do it again in college. Either one is doable. I recommend students keep foreign language all 4 years of high school. I like for families to understand how a college is going to read a file and what comes along with the student's application. This is what is called a school profile. A school profile comes from your guidance counselor at school. This is just an example of one of a school in Charlotte, of a place that I work with, a school in Charlotte that I work with. And it lists the classes that are available to each student. So it lists the AP classes, the IB classes, the honors classes, the post-AP classes. Really anything that is offered is listed on a school profile, hopefully. Sometimes it's not, and that should be a conversation you have with the guidance counselor. But a college admissions official will go to the school profile and look at what is offered. And then they will compare this list to your student's transcript. And they will look at how your student took advantage of the most rigorous curriculum. And this is where balance and sanity come into play, because a lot of families will say, my student can't take everything at the hardest level. Like, that's just not realistic. I get it. I totally get it. It depends on how selective of a college you want to earn admission to, and what kind of student you have. The selective schools that admit less than 30% of the applicant pool, are usually looking for students to take at least 4, if not 5, of their core classes at the most difficult level. This usually means a couple of honors classes in 9th or 10th grade, maybe an AP in 10th grade, depends, 2 or 3 APs in 11th grade, sometimes 4, and then 5 or 6 APs as a senior. This can make some parents very short of breath. So if you're overwhelmed, don't panic. It depends on your child, it depends on the college, and it depends on your high school, which we're going to talk about. So in the school profile, it tells a lot about the high school, and this is how a student is judged in the process. So the person who's reading the admission file will look at the percent of students going to college, because there are many schools that send, 30, 40, 50% of their high school seniors to vocational school. And that's okay, but that's part of the high school context. Colleges will also look at the number of APs offered. I remind my students, I came from a very rural school in the South, and there were no APs offered at my school. I've never taken an AP class, and I've worked in this business for 15 years. So it is not about how many AP classes are on the record. It is much more about how students maximize their options within the context of their school. So if only honors classes are offered, try to take the honors classes. If a couple of APs are offered, try to take those. If lots of APs are offered, then learn to balance, learn to manage, take as many as you can. But it's really the context that matters. Grade distribution and rank. I can show you that here in a minute. This is also on the school profile. So when students or parents go through a school profile, you can see right here, typically a high school will list quintiles. Some schools don't do this, so don't panic if you don't have it. But usually a high school will say, here is our top slice of students, and here is their GPA range. And then here's our next slice, and here's our next slice. It gives a college the understanding of how students stack up against each other, which is hard because sometimes there's a really smart senior class and students will say to me, my whole class is smart. Like, I have mostly A's and I'm in the 3rd decile or quintile. I get it. Talk to the guidance counselor or talk to your college consultant or whoever you're working with and ask them if they could address this. This is something that guidance counselors can address in the guidance counselor recommendation, and you can help them do it. Guidance counselors are very capable of doing this, to say this is one of the smartest senior classes we've ever had. This grade distribution is somewhat unusual in that we've had so many intelligent students in the class, et cetera, et cetera. But mostly, again, top tier schools are looking for students in the top quintile or decile, and then schools that are less selective will certainly go deeper in the class. So don't panic about that if you're not in that top decile. There are plenty of schools out there that are looking for you. So that was grade distribution and rank, magnet programs. Many schools, especially students that I work with, have the opportunity to participate in magnet programs. These are typically application-based, and they are ones that can be shown to families as a boost in the academic record. So, if you wanted to apply to a human psychology magnet program, or some schools have a math science magnet program. Some schools have just a gifted magnet program. All of those are great. I mean, some high schools are considered magnet high schools. All of that is terrific. I always tell families, you just want to choose the place that has the best peer group for your child. Some students really thrive in having a high achieving peer group that really gets their motor running, and they love being around smart kids, and it's awesome. Other kids, it really overwhelms them because everybody's smart and everybody's racing to the finish, and it's just too much pressure. Talk to your student, ask them what kind of friends they want, or what kind of friends they have now, and how they want to duplicate that in high school. That's always a conversation you can have with them, or have the guidance counselor have with them, or a college consultant, whoever you have, because peer group is really important in magnet programs. AP versus IB versus dual enrollment. This is a question we face all the time in curriculum planning. The IB diploma is considered very impressive in college admissions. And I do have families that will say, is it worth it? Do we put our kid through this, basically? It is for the right student. Again, there is no one silver bullet at college admissions. It is not a science. It is an art. As someone who's been in the business for many years, an IB diploma is typically for someone who's a very good writer, who enjoys writing. There are quite a few writing assignments in the IB diploma. There is what's called an extended essay at the very end. Not a thesis project like you would think in college, but like the high school version of it. And it's a lot of pressure. AP classes, well, I'll back up. An IB curriculum, you can choose some classes that you want to take at the higher level. So if a student is really good at math and science, they can take those at the higher level. So there is some level of customization, but all the IB classes are challenging. So if a student says, oh, I'm terrible at history, I'm really worried about IB history of the Americas. Yeah, it's hard. There's no way I can fix that. So if that's something that your student's worried about, of having all the rigorous courses all at one time, that may be a conversation you have with them, and ask them, maybe they want to take AP classes. AP classes are impressive also in the college admissions world. There are just some pitfalls to avoid. The biggest pitfall with AP curricula is the easy APs. And if your child is sitting with you right now, or is somewhere in the room, they're probably wishing that I weren't saying this, because your children know what the easy APs are, and they're the same at every school, usually. Most of the time, AP statistics is considered easier than AP calculus. And a lot of parents look at me like I have three heads, because any of us who have lived in the real world, most of us think that statistics is more useful than calculus. And I agree with you. As a business owner, I certainly use statistics more than I use calculus. But colleges really consider calculus more college preparatory. So if your student has the option to choose between AP Calc, and they choose AP Calc over AP Statistics, and they choose AP Statistics, that is considered the easier option. AP Psych is considered an easier option. Really interesting elective. It fascinates a lot of my students. Sorry, my email's going off. But AP Psych is considered an easier class. if you replace AP US history with AP Psych. This happens to juniors. Well, they'll say to me, I'm not going to take AP US, but I will take AP Psych. No, 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 not a fair trade. AP US is considered very rigorous. AP Psych, not as rigorous. So you just want to be careful with what you're trading. So if you're trading APs for APs, make sure you're trading apples for apples, rigor for rigor. I have a student who wants to drop AP Spanish as a senior. And so I said to her, well, if you drop AP Spanish, you need to take an extra AP Math or an extra AP Science, because AP Foreign Language is very difficult. So if you want to drop AP Foreign Language, it needs to be something equally rigorous, which is usually AP Math or AP Science. She decided to keep AP Foreign Language. But when you're thinking about taking something out of the curriculum, think about the hole that you're leaving there and then replace it with something equally rigorous to fill that hole. That's the way to succeed. So AP Psych, AP Statistics, AP Human Geography, that is fine for 10th graders, even 9th graders to take. I don't suggest it for 11th and 12th graders. It's just too easy. You don't need it. AP Environmental Science can go either way. Some schools have AP Environmental Science that is very challenging. Some schools, not so much. Chat with your guidance counselor or whoever you look to for advice. If AP Environmental Science is really challenging at your school, the school needs to tell colleges that it is. There is an assumption that Envi-Sci is easier than AP Bio, AP Physics, AP Chem. So just know what you're getting into if you get into AP Environmental Science. With the IB curriculum, going back to IB for a minute, they do have a lot of group work in the IB curriculum. Again, some students love that. Some students don't love that. So just another factor to consider if you have the option between AP and IB. I didn't even have APs. And I turned out okay. So don't worry if you don't. The AP curriculum is easier to tailor to a student. So for instance, a student doesn't like history, like I was talking about earlier, they could take honors history, but take AP Math and AP Science and AP English and just back off of history. That's easier to do in an AP curriculum than it is in an IB curriculum. So think about how your student would thrive and how that customization would be necessary, and that may help you decide. Dual enrollment. This has become a new thing in the last several years, I would say. Many high schools are offering dual enrollment classes with a local college or a local community college. It sounds cool. And to a parent, it's like, oh gosh, we get 3 credits and it probably transfers and that's money I saved. Sounds good. Yeah. I wish it was as easy of a sell to colleges. Dual enrollment, there's a bit of a gray area with dual enrollment. Some dual enrollment classes are considered very rigorous. Some college composition classes are considered very rigorous, but there's no rubric. For instance, AP English has a standard beginning and a standard ending. Dual enrollment English, students could be watching movies all day. They could be, writing really long papers. There's no standardization of the curriculum. So if a student chooses to take a dual enrollment class over an AP class, I encourage that student to talk to the dual enrollment teacher and see if he or she would be willing to write a recommendation. And then that teacher or professor could explain the rigor of the class. That usually solves the issue. Okay. Feel free to type questions in the chat box if I'm talking too fast, or if you're getting overwhelmed, you can always give me feedback. I'm happy to have that. Okay. So what does all this mean? That's what most of my students will say to me. It depends, which is usually my students' least favorite answer. I've alluded to this before, that it depends on the college selectivity. I counsel students who go on to Harvard and Stanford, and I counsel students who go on to less selective schools, and that's okay. We at College Solutions believe that it's all about the right fit, the right academic fit, the right social fit and the right financial fit for a family. It's not just about what ranking your school is on US News and World Report. I think that system is really flawed. It's about the school that's right for you. I have students who turn down higher ranked colleges to go to a lower ranked school because it's a better fit. I think that's awesome. So don't get caught up in the selectivity as much. Really think about what fits your child and how that's going to affect how the college of your choice or your student's choice will see them. I have a question. Great. If you take 2 years of a foreign language in middle school that count as high school credit, do you still need all 4 years in high school? Very good question. That's normal. A lot of students take foreign language in middle school, and that's great, right? They're already ahead of the game. They're doing high school level work in middle school. Like, we're all feeling good about them, right? Colleges still want them to take all 4 years. Students don't want to, but if a student is, in Spanish 3 as a 9th grader, they can go Spanish 3 as a 9th grader, Spanish 4 as a 10th grader, maybe AP Spanish as an 11th grader, and they may max out after that. There may be no more AP Spanish after that. Some schools have AP Spanish literature, but if you can take 4 years after you've done middle school, that just makes you look even better. But again, like, it's up to the student. And if you're going to take it out of a curriculum, replace it with something equally rigorous. Good question. You should also think about a college's curriculum. When I have students who are looking at certain colleges, I will help them to think about how to tailor their application to meet that college. So for instance, if a student's applying to an engineering school, I encourage them to take the hardest sciences they can, and maybe even an extra math. Again, because that school is going to be looking for engineers who are good at math and science, right? Common sense. Same thing, if a student's interested in foreign language, which, doesn't happen as often as I would love, then I would say, can you take Spanish and take an extra language? Do you want to take Spanish and Latin? Do you want to, some of my students take an extra class on Duolingo and learn an extra language. Cool. That kind of thing. If you think about what the student's story is going to be in a college application, and then think about how the college would receive that, that might help with curriculum planning. It also depends on the region of the college. Students think I'm crazy all the time, but I always tell my students they are much more interesting the further they go away from home, which doesn't make moms very happy with me. But, if I have a student here in Virginia and they're looking at a college in North Carolina, they're going to be read fairly, of course, but they don't bring a lot of geographic diversity. Whereas if they're looking at a school in Oregon, Oregon's going to be really excited to see them because they may not have as many Virginia applicants. So when you're thinking about curriculum planning, maybe you don't need an extra AP math because you're applying to Oregon schools, and Oregon schools are going to be excited about a Virginia student. So that's something to consider. Another question. Great. Well, if I could get my cursor to work. Come on, cursor. There we go. If a student has a choice to take AP Calc AB or Calc BC in 10th grade, what should be the criteria to choose? Great question. So if you have a choice between AB and BC, the first question I would ask the school counselor is, if my child takes AB, can the student then take BC calculus the next year? That's the big question, because some schools don't let a student take BC calculus after they've taken AB. So if the answer is no, you cannot take BC calculus after AB, I would go ahead and take BC. If the answer is yes, you can take AB and then BC, I think that's a terrific progression. My other question would be, what other post-AP maths are offered? Some schools have multivariable equations, some schools have linear algebra. Some schools don't have anything past AP math, AP calculus. So it may be worth asking the school, is there anything else for my child to take after AP calculus? So just food for thought. Okay. I think that is the answer. Okay, great. Okay. Diversity goals is another thing I just wanted to remind you of that colleges do have diversity goals. They want students from all different kinds of backgrounds who represent all different points of view. And this means diversity of all kinds. I try to tell students now that colleges are no longer looking for well-rounded students, which is what they were looking for when I applied to college 20 years ago. They are looking for students with points of view, or what we call pointed students, pointy students. And what I mean by that is that they are looking for students who have a passion and they pursue it in a variety of different ways. So for instance, if I have a student who's interested in lacrosse, he or she may play lacrosse, but then they may volunteer to coach lacrosse for some younger students. They may do YouTube videos to teach lacrosse to some folks that don't have access to lacrosse. They may play on a travel team. There's just lots of different things about lacrosse. Maybe they start a nonprofit to gather lacrosse supplies for students who don't have access to lacrosse. All of those pieces come together to form a point of view. And it doesn't have to be a sport. I remind my students who come to me and they aren't athletes, like, you don't have to be an athlete to get into college. You can be an artist, you can be a musician, you can be a performing artist, you can be someone who takes apart computers and puts them together. There are all kinds of things. Be authentic, be yourself. That is so much cooler than trying to be something else. Athletic and artistic goals come into play when judging a student's curriculum, especially at these schools that are actively recruiting athletes. So if you have a student who is exceptionally talented in some sort of athletic skill, that's something to talk with their coach about. I work with these students every year of going to Cornell for swimming or going to Denison for lacrosse. If they are an athlete and they are recruitable, they are still expected to maintain, a strong curriculum, but the expectations may be different because of athletics. And same with artists. If you're applying to an art school or a performing arts school, your portfolio or your audition may be of more value to a college than your curriculum. So something else to consider when putting together your curriculum. Oh, another question. Are colleges okay with dual enrollment if you don't pass up an AP class? Dual enrollment at my child's school is the same weighted credit as an AP. Yes. So if you only are offered dual enrollment, if it's, college prep, honors, and then dual enrollment, if dual enrollment is the most difficult level, go for it. That's great. Okay. All right. That's all I have on the docket. We've got a clean 30 minutes. So hopefully you've had time to eat dinner or settle down for the night. Any more questions that I can answer for you? We'll see if anything pops up. Okay, you look like you're good. You're always welcome to email me. I'm glad to offer my advice. My email is just my first name, Margaret, at collegesolutions.com. Oh, I do have a question. Great. How about a 3-sport varsity athlete who is not going to play in college? How does athletic diversity weigh versus focusing on a single sport and going all in? Great question. This is a toughie because if you're not going to play in college, it doesn't matter as much to the college, which is hard for an athlete to hear because it's so much time, it's so much dedication, a lot of travel for parents. But if you are not recruitable, the student's not recruitable, it's just an extracurricular. So for some sports like basketball that have a lot of evening commitments or lacrosse that have a lot of weekend commitments, I always say to a student, like, being a 3-sport athlete is great. It is not required. So if they want to do other things, or if they feel like they could drop back on a sport and focus more on their schoolwork, I would support that. Good questions. Thank you, guys. Anything else? Oh, one more. Okay, two more. Do summer programs or pre-college programs provide additional help during the selection process? Great question. I'm careful with pre-college programs. There are some that are terrific, and there are some that are what I call pay to play, where you just pay a chunk of money and it's not that invigorating of an academic experience. I would just encourage you as parents to really research the programs, and most of all, research the faculty of the programs. This is what I do. This is what my staff does before we send anybody on a summer program. We want the faculty of these programs to be established academics. So if the website doesn't list the faculty, that's usually a red flag to me. Or if it shows pictures of the faculty, but no bios, I usually call and ask. But you really want to make sure that the faculty are established academics. What is the minimum extracurricular requirement? Also a good question. It depends. There's 10 entries on the common application. The common application is common to hundreds of schools. There are 10 lines to fill in for extracurricular activities. I always tell students it is best to fill up at least half of those lines. Otherwise, it looks really sparse. Preferably, you can fill up more than half. So minimum of 5. You'd be surprised how quickly students can get to 5, whether it be with clubs or a community service or a summer job. All of that counts, but minimum of 5, I would suggest. Okay. Anything else? You guys have great questions. I think you're good. Maybe. Okay, great. Well, as I said before, feel free to reach out over email. You're always welcome to a complimentary consultation with me. I'm happy to do that, Margaret@collegesolutions.com. But I love this work. I love the students. So if you have any burning issues, you can always reach out. My team and I are glad to help anytime. Thank you for coming. Feel free to ask questions, and we'll help you anytime. Oh, one more question. Does shadowing count as an extracurricular? Absolutely. I love job shadowing. I think that's a great way to figure out what a student wants to major in. Perfect. Okay. Thank you guys. Have a good night. Take care.